Margaretchen had been serving tables at the Sterling Room for 32 years. Her hands knew every curve of those white porcelain plates. Her feet had memorized every crack in the marble floor. At 58, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had long ago stopped trying to impress anyone. The restaurant sat on the corner of 5th and Madison, all polished brass and crystal chandeliers. It was the kind of place where politicians made deals over oysters and anniversary couples whispered over candlelight. Margaret had seen them all come and go, keeping their secrets, refilling their water glasses without being asked. That Tuesday started like any other. She arrived at 3 in the afternoon, tied her black apron around her waist, and checked her section. Table 12 was hers tonight. The corner booth by the window. The good table. The one Mr. Holloway, the owner, always reserved for his most important guests. By 7 o'clock, the dinner rush was building. Margaret weaved between tables, her notepad tucked in her apron pocket, her smile practiced but genuine. She had learned long ago that kindness cost nothing, and sometimes was the only thing that mattered. That was when she noticed him. The old man sat alone at table 12, looking small in the large leather booth. He must have been in his late 70s, maybe older. His gray hair was neatly combed but thin, and his checkered shirt was clean but worn at the collar. His hands trembled slightly as he studied the menu, his eyes squinting at the small print. Margaret approached with her usual warmth. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Sterling Room. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The man looked up, and she saw confusion flicker across his weathered face. His fingers fumbled with the menu. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice rough with age. "I'm having trouble reading this. The letters are so small." Margaret smiled and gently took the menu from his hands. "That's quite all right. Let me help you. We have a wonderful roasted chicken tonight, very tender. Or, if you prefer seafood, the salmon is fresh and comes with roasted vegetables." The man nodded slowly, but she could see the worry in his eyes. He glanced toward the door, then back at her. "The chicken sounds nice," he said, "but I need to ask you something. How much does it cost?" "I have $42. Is that enough?" Margaret's heart squeezed. She glanced down at the menu in her hands. The roasted chicken was $38. With tax and tip, he would be short. "That's plenty," she said softly. "Don't you worry about a thing." She took his order for the chicken, a side salad, and a glass of water. As she walked back toward the kitchen, she made a decision. She would pay the difference herself. It was only $15 or so. She had done it before, for struggling young couples, for single mothers counting coins. This was no different. But Mr. Holloway was different. James Holloway was 45, tall and sharp in his tailored navy suit. He ran the Sterling Room like a military operation. Every plate had to be perfect. Every customer had to spend a certain amount, and every table had to turn over efficiently. He stood near the bar now, his dark eyes scanning the dining room with the intensity of a hawk. Margaret brought the old man his salad first, placing it down with care. He thanked her 3 times, his gratitude almost painful to witness. She patted his shoulder gently. "You enjoy that, sir. Your chicken will be out shortly." She was heading back to check on her other tables when Mr. Holloway's voice cut through the dining room noise. "Margaret, a word." She turned to find him standing beside table 12, his face tight with displeasure. The old man was eating his salad slowly, unaware of the storm brewing above him. Margaret walked over, her stomach tightening. "Yes, Mr. Holloway?" He pulled her aside, his voice low but sharp. "What is that man doing at table 12? Margaret kept her voice steady. "He's having dinner, sir. I took his order. That table is reserved for the Carmichael party. They're due here in 20 minutes. High-value clients. And you've seated someone who looks like he wandered in from a soup kitchen." Margaret felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her composure. The reservation book showed table 12 was open until 8:30. "I checked. I don't care what the book says. I need that table. Move him." Margaret glanced back at the old man. He was carefully cutting his lettuce into small pieces, taking his time with each bite. Moving him now, in front of the entire restaurant, would humiliate him. "Mr. Holloway, he's already eating." Let me seat the Carmichael party at table 9. It's just as nice and... I'm not discussing this with you, Margaret. Move him, or I will. She stood there for a moment, weighing 32 years of service against one moment of doing what was right. The choice was surprisingly easy. No, sir, I won't do that to him. Mr. Holloway's face darkened. Excuse me, he's a paying customer. He deserves to finish his meal in peace. The silence between them stretched thin and dangerous. Around them, the restaurant continued its elegant dance, but Margaret felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Then you're fired, Mr. Holloway said flatly. Collect your things and leave. Tonight. Margaret felt the words hit her like cold water, but she didn't flinch. She untied her apron slowly, folded it with care, and set it on the nearest empty table. Then she walked back to table 12. The old man looked up as she approached, sensing something was wrong. Is everything all right, dear? Margaret smiled, and it was real. Everything's fine. Your chicken will be out in just a few minutes. Someone else will bring it to you, but I want you to know it's been a pleasure serving you tonight. The old man reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak but warm. Thank you, he said. You've been very kind to me. My wife passed 6 months ago, and I haven't been out to eat since. This was our anniversary. 47 years. I wanted to do something she would have liked. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. She would be very proud of you, she said gently. She squeezed his hand once more, then walked through the dining room for the last time. She didn't look back at Mr. Holloway. She didn't need to. Outside, the November air was cold and sharp. Margaret stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, watching people hurry past with their briefcases and shopping bags. 32 years, gone in 30 seconds. She thought about her mortgage payment, her aging mother's medical bills, the car that needed new tires. But mostly, she thought about the old man's face when she helped him read the menu. She started walking toward the subway, pulling her coat tighter against the wind. That night, Margaret didn't sleep much. She sat at her small kitchen table, drinking tea and running the numbers in her head. She had some savings, but not much. Maybe enough for 2 months if she was careful. She would need to find another job quickly. At 58, that was easier said than done. The next morning, her phone rang at 9 o'clock. Unknown number. Hello, is this Margaret Chin? Yes, this is she. Ms. Chun, my name is Patricia Holmes. I'm calling from the office of Mr. Robert Ashford. He would like to meet with you this morning, if you're available. Margaret frowned. I'm sorry, I don't know any Robert Ashford. Mr. Ashford knows you, Ms. Chun. He was very insistent that I reach you first thing this morning. Would 10:30 work for you? Margaret almost said no. It had to be some kind of mistake. But something in the woman's voice, a warmth beneath the professional tone, made her curious. Where would this meeting be? The Ashford Building, downtown. 42nd floor. I'll have a pass waiting for you at security. After she hung up, Margaret sat staring at her phone. The Ashford Building. She knew that name. Ashford Industries was one of the largest companies in the city, maybe in the country. Real estate, technology, investments. Why would someone from Ashford Industries want to meet with an unemployed waitress? She almost didn't go, but she had nothing else to do that morning, and curiosity won out over caution. At 10:15, Margaret stood in the gleaming lobby of the Ashford Building, feeling very small. Everything was marble and steel, all sharp angles and expensive art. Young people in designer suits rushed past, talking on phones, carrying tablets. Security gave her a visitor's badge and directed her to the elevators. The 42nd floor. The elevator ride felt like it took forever. Margaret watched the numbers climb, her reflection staring back at her from the polished doors. She had worn her best dress, the navy one she saved for church, but she still felt out of place. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire city spread out below. A young woman sat behind a curved desk, perfectly put together. Margaret Chun? Yes. Mr. Ashford is expecting you. Right this way. Margaret followed her down a quiet hallway, past offices with glass walls where serious people had serious meetings. At the end of the hall was a large wooden door. The receptionist knocked once, then opened it. "Miss Chun is here, sir." "Send her in, please." Margaret stepped into the office and stopped breathing. Sitting behind an enormous desk, in an expensive gray suit instead of a worn checkered shirt, was the old man from Table 12. He wasn't trembling now. His eyes weren't confused. He stood up as she entered, moving with surprising strength, and smiled at her with perfect clarity. "Ms. Chun, please sit down." Margaret stood frozen in the doorway. "I don't understand." Robert Ashford walked around his desk and gestured to the comfortable chairs by the window. "I imagine you're quite confused. Please, let me explain." Margaret sat slowly, her mind racing. The old man, the trembling hands, the confusion over the menu, it had all been an act. But why? Ashford sat across from her, and now she could see the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the quiet power in the way he carried himself. He was probably in his late 70s, yes, but there was nothing frail about him. "I apologize for the deception," he began, "but I needed to see something for myself." "See what?" "The truth about people. The Sterling Room is one of my properties. I own the building it sits in. I've been concerned about how Mr. Holloway runs that restaurant. I've heard complaints about the way staff is treated, about customers being judged by their appearance rather than welcomed with hospitality. So I decided to investigate personally." Margaret's hands gripped the arms of her chair. "You pretended to be someone who couldn't afford dinner just to test your own restaurant." "I pretended to be someone who might need a little kindness," Ashford corrected gently. "And you showed me exactly what I needed to see. You treated me with dignity when you thought I was nobody. You were willing to lose your job rather than embarrass a stranger. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." "I lost my job anyway," Margaret said, and she couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Yes, you did. And James Holloway lost his about 3 hours ago." Margaret stared at him. Ashford leaned back in his chair. "I've been in business for 53 years, Ms. Chun. I started with nothing, worked my way up from the factory floor to the boardroom. I've learned that the most important thing in any business isn't the product or the profit margin. It's the people. How you treat them, how they treat each other, how they treat the customers. Get that right, and everything else follows." He paused, studying her face. "I've also learned that finding people with real integrity, people who will do the right thing even when it costs them something, that's rare. Precious, even." Margaret didn't know what to say. The anger she had felt last night, the worry about bills in the future, it all seemed to be swirling inside her chest. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly. "Because I'd like to offer you a position. Not as a waitress, though there will be nothing wrong with that. I need someone to help me run my hospitality division. Someone who understands what real service means. Someone who sees people, not just dollar signs." Margaret felt like the room was tilting. "You want to hire me? To run a division?" "Director of guest experience for all Ashford properties. We have 12 restaurants, 6 hotels, and 3 event venues. You would oversee staff training, establish service standards, handle customer relations. It's a big job. The salary is $180,000 a year plus benefits." The number was so large that Margaret couldn't quite process it. That was more than she had made in the last 4 years combined. "Mr. Ashford, I'm just a waitress. I don't have a college degree. I don't know anything about running a division." "You know the most important thing," Ashford said firmly. "You know how to treat people with kindness and respect, regardless of who they are or what they can do for you. Everything else can be taught." He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "My wife died 8 months ago. We were married for 47 years. She was the one who taught me that success without compassion is just emptiness. Last night was actually our anniversary. I went to that restaurant because it was her favorite place. I wanted to feel close to her somehow." His voice softened, and Margaret saw the grief there, carefully controlled but real. "When you helped me, when you protected me from humiliation, you reminded me why she loved that place. And you reminded me why I got into this business in the first place. To create spaces where people feel valued. Margaret felt tears on her cheeks now, and she didn't try to hide them. "I'm sorry about your wife." "Thank you," Ashford said quietly. He turned back to face her. "So what do you say, Miss Chun? Will you help an old man build something worth building?" Margaret thought about her 32 years at the Sterling Room. All those tables, all those customers, all those moments of small kindness that she had never expected would add up to anything. She thought about her mother, who always told her that good work done with good intentions would be rewarded eventually, even if you couldn't see how. She thought about the old man in the checkered shirt, confused and vulnerable, and how easy it would have been to look past him. "Yes," she said, "I'll do it." Ashford smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Excellent. Can you start Monday?" "I can start today if you need me to." He laughed, a warm sound that filled the office. "Monday is fine. That gives you time to think about what you want to accomplish. But I do have one request for today, if you're willing." "What's that?" "Have lunch with me. There's a little diner 2 blocks from here that makes the best meatloaf in the city. My wife and I used to go there every Wednesday. I haven't been back since she passed. I could use the company." Margaret smiled through her tears. "I would be honored." They had lunch at that little diner, sitting in a cracked vinyl booth while buses rumbled past outside. Ashford told her about his wife, about their life together, about the dreams they had shared. Margaret told him about her daughter, who was a teacher in Boston, about her mother who still did crossword puzzles every morning at 83, about the small joys of a life spent in service. The meatloaf was as good as he had promised. When Margaret started her new job the following Monday, she discovered that Ashford had already announced changes across all his properties. Every restaurant and hotel would be required to implement dignity training for all staff. Customer service scores would be measured not just by spending, but by how welcomed and respected guests felt. And any manager who mistreated staff or showed bias toward customers would be immediately dismissed. The Sterling Room got a new manager, a woman named Sarah, who had worked her way up from hostess to general manager at one of Ashford hotels. Sarah's first act was to invite all the former staff to return, including Margaret, though Margaret politely declined. She had a different role to play now. Over the next year, Margaret transformed the guest experience across Ashford's hospitality division. She created training programs focused on empathy and attention. She instituted policies that empowered staff to solve problems creatively. She visited every property personally, spending time with housekeepers and bellhops and line cooks, listening to their ideas and concerns. Revenue increased, but more importantly, something else changed. Staff turnover dropped dramatically. Customer satisfaction scores reached record highs. People started seeking out Ashford properties, specifically because of the way they were treated there. Margaret found herself in meetings with executives, presenting reports to board, making decisions that affected hundreds of employees. It was terrifying at first, but she learned to trust her instincts, the same instincts that had guided her through 32 years of reading people's needs and responding with grace. Ashford became her mentor and, eventually, her friend. They had lunch together most Wednesdays at that little diner, talking about business and life and loss. He told her once that hiring her was the best decision he had made in a decade. "You gave me my purpose back," he said over coffee and pie. "After my wife died, I was just going through the motions. But watching you transform these businesses, seeing you lift people up, it reminded me why any of this matters." Margaret squeezed his hand across the table. "You gave me a chance when no one else would have. You saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself." "I saw exactly what was always there," Ashford replied. "I just gave you a platform to show everyone else." 2 years after that fateful night at the Sterling Room, Margaret stood on a stage accepting an industry award for excellence in hospitality management. The ballroom was full of executives and entrepreneurs, all dressed in their finest. As she looked out at the crowd, she thought about how strange life could be, how one small act of kindness could cascade into something you never imagined. In her speech, she talked about the real meaning of service, about seeing people not as transactions but as human beings deserving of dignity and respect, about how the smallest gestures, a patient explanation of a menu, a moment of understanding, could matter more than anyone realized. We're all just trying to get through this life with some grace. she said. Some days we're the ones who need help. Some days we're the ones who can offer it. The secret is being willing to do both, without judgment, without expectation of reward. Because that's what it means to be human. That's what it means to build something that lasts. The applause washed over her. But what she remembered most was seeing Ashford in the front row, standing and clapping with tears in his eyes. After the ceremony, as they rode back to the office together, Ashford was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. My wife would have loved you, you know. She always said that the measure of a person isn't what they do when everyone's watching. It's what they do when no one would ever know. You passed that test before you even knew you were taking it. Margaret looked out at the city lights, sliding past the window. I was just being myself. I didn't know any other way to be. Exactly, Ashford said. That's what makes it real. Margaret Chin retired at 65, after 7 years of transforming hospitality standards across the Ashford Empire. By then, the approach she had pioneered had been adopted by dozens of other companies, creating ripples far beyond what she could have imagined. At her retirement party, held at the Sterling Room in a lovely bit of poetry, she was surrounded by staff members whose lives she had touched, executives who had learned from her example, and customers who had felt the difference her philosophy made. Ashford, now 84 and moving slower but still sharp as ever, gave a toast. 7 years ago, I walked into one of my restaurants pretending to be someone I wasn't. I was testing my employees, yes, but I was also testing myself. Testing whether I still believed in the principles my wife and I built our lives on, whether kindness still had a place in a world of bottom lines and profit margins. He raised his glass toward Margaret. This woman showed me that not only does kindness have a place, it's the whole point. Everything else is just details. Margaret, you didn't just change how we do business. You reminded us why we do business. To serve, to connect, to make people's lives a little bit better. Thank you for that gift. The room erupted in applause. Margaret stood and hugged him. This old man who had seen her worth when she was invisible, who had bet on her kindness when the rest of the world saw only a waitress. Thank you for taking a chance on me, she whispered. Thank you for proving me right, he whispered back. Margaret spent her retirement doing exactly what she wanted. She traveled to see her daughter and grandchildren. She volunteered at a local community center, teaching job skills to people trying to get back on their feet. She had lunch with her mother every Sunday, solving crossword puzzles and sharing stories. And every Wednesday, like clockwork, she met Ashford at that little diner for meatloaf and conversation. Some stories don't have neat endings. Life is messier than that, more complicated, full of gray areas and unanswered questions. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, doing the right thing at the right moment opens a door you never knew existed. Margaret Chun had spent her entire working life being kind to strangers. She had never expected anything in return except the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The fact that one of those strangers turned out to be someone who could change her life was, in the end, just proof of something she had always believed: we're all connected in ways we can't see. The person you help today might be the person who saves you tomorrow. Or maybe they won't be, and that's okay too. You help anyway. You show up anyway. You treat people with dignity anyway. Because that's what it means to be human. That's what it means to matter. Not the job title or the salary or the awards. Just a simple, revolutionary act of seeing another person and choosing to be kind. Margaret understood that when she helped an old man read a menu, and in doing so, she didn't just save his dignity. She saved her own future. Sometimes, the best investments we make are the ones we never meant to make at all. The ones that cost us something but return more than we could have imagined. Not in money, though that came too, but in meaning, in purpose, in the knowledge that your life, however small it might seem, can ripple out and touch others in ways you'll never fully understand. That's the real story, not the dramatic firing or the surprise and revelation, or even the happy ending. It's the quiet truth underneath it all. We become what we practice. Margaret practiced kindness for 32 years, and when her moment came, she was ready. Not because she was trying to be heroic, but because she had built her life, one small choice at a time, on a foundation of decency. And in the end, that foundation held. It held her up when everything else fell away. It held her steady when the test came, and it gave her something to stand on when a door opened that she never expected to walk through. That's all any of us can do. Build that foundation. Practice those small kindnesses. Show up with integrity, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. And then trust that somehow, in ways we can't predict or control, it will matter. It always matters. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to hear more stories that remind us of the goodness that still exists in the world. Leave a comment below telling us about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness, or when you were able to help someone else. Your story might inspire someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for listening, and remember to be kind to everyone you meet, because you never know whose life you might change with one simple act of compassion.